Hey guys, Krunch here, back in Alpha 19. Finally went and got some better recording software. I've had a lot of requests for videos on maps, doing a lot more maps for 7 Days to Die as we're coming up to Alpha 19. Got a whole bunch of stuff going on, had a lot of requests on a lot of different Discord channels for a few different things. Today I wanted to kind of cover a basic one, which is doing a custom biome. So these instructions will pretty much work for a regular RWG vanilla or a custom made or a nitrogen map, for example. I use nitrogen quite a bit, so some of the steps that I will use here are using nitrogen tools and features, but generally you can do most of this stuff with just a couple other pieces of free software. So I'll go through those and we'll get started. So the first thing you probably want to grab is, if you don't use Photoshop, Photoshop is one that works, but I don't have the money for a subscription for Photoshop, so I use a free program called Krita. I can put links in the description for you. The other one you might want to think about using, which is one I recommend almost all the time, is paint.net, which is also free. I'll put a link in for that as well. So what we're going to talk about today is basically painting a biome. So I've got a map ready here. We'll start going through this. So we want to edit the biomes. We want to go into the biomes.png for the map. So I've already got this one set up. I can show you I generated this map already in nitrogen, so I have a preview to start with. So let's look. I usually do these in forest, and then I go back and change them and just redo the preview, which is something I'll probably do another video on eventually as well. So I mean, we look at our features here. I put in some rivers. I can show you how to do a basic paint job on here. You can see I've already got the radiation border. This is wasteland. This is how nitrogen displays waste. But I'm really not really happy with all this forest. So we're going to maybe put some snow up here. We've got some rivers that could break this up. Maybe we could leave this Greenland. I also added in a highway, which is a feature that Damocles is testing with, and I'm also building some accessories to go with. We're looking at doing that, so I threw that in there, and I thought maybe that would be a good natural barrier. There's no mods required for the basic set. It's actually a vanilla block, so just goes into the prefabs file. So you can really get as detailed or as basic with these as you want. Some people don't really mind all that much, but most of the maps I do, I kind of spend a lot of time on them, so I try to get them how I want them before I release them. So I threw in some extra rivers here. We could say maybe some desert here. We also, wasteland is not really strong enough. If you guys have noticed in Alpha 18 and 19, waste, and maybe you could even say burnt forest, are not that they're weak, but they really, waste in particular, it kind of belongs underneath a city. It's not, I don't really think that it's supposed to be mountains and a biome anymore, the way that the others are. So in most of my maps now, I try to kind of focus my wasteland around specific populated areas, and then I use the burnt generally for transitions between snow or between forest. I generally don't like to put snow touching desert, just as a general rule. These are just kind of rules of thumb that I go by. You can really make whatever it is that you like with this, but I try to kind of break it up and make it look a little natural. I'll do some general painting, but then I can also show you a couple of combos. Maybe we can have some fun with these islands, or maybe this coast in here. You can make some really cool, unique places without having to spend too much time or go too crazy. So, alrighty, let's jump right in. So, the first step we're going to do is actually one of the nitrogen steps. If you're not using nitro and you're just doing this for RWG, you could skip this part. But what I like to do with the preview map that I get from nitro is make a stencil that I will use with my height map. I'd usually do this in paint.net, this step. So we don't want those colors to bleed through. What we're interested in for a template for the biomes, because I mean, if you look at the biomes file, oh, I did that a little too soon. If you look at the biomes file, it's basically just flat solid color, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but for right now we want to make the stencil. So I used to actually cut all the water out of these, but for this demo I'm going to leave it in. If you want to get really accurate and be very detailed along the coastline, especially if you're interested in putting other biomes underneath the water where they're not visible, which is a really neat, cool trick you could do with, say, like islands. I did a lot of islands in 18. I did a whole lot of islands in 18. With a lot of those, I actually hid biomes that weren't included or were in a different part of the map, just so that people could mine underneath and have access a little bit closer. A lot of people said, "Oh, you know, the biomes are so far apart." It's like, well, if you looked under the ocean, or if you looked at the biomes file, you'd see that you had all kinds of ore around you. I tried to tell people, but it's all good. However, everybody wants to play it, so I'm gonna go ahead and make this black and white, and I'm also gonna fool with the brightness and the contrast, which these are just standard features in paint.net. So we'll go to brightness, contrast, and what I really want to do is kind of make the features on the map kind of pop a little bit. So I usually brighten it and sharpen it, try to get it, and then just bring it back down to where I can really see. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. It's a little dark, but now you see we can basically see all of the terrain features. Now, you know, depending on how crazy you get, some people really don't mind, but for me, you have these smooth areas before they transition to heights, or a good place is water breaks, because you don't have to be exactly specific with underneath the water. You don't have to be quite so neat, but you can really get OCD about this if you like to. So on some maps I do, and then others I just kind of go easy. I'm like Bob Ross, just however you like to do it. So we're gonna make a copy of this, and I don't want to write. I should probably have started with backups, and I will tell you right now, when you start doing this and you really get into it, like, be sure that you're backing this stuff up all the time, because I've lost so much work. There's a couple people that yell at me a lot for that. So we've got that saved, so we can actually close out of paint.net. We want to get Krita rocking now. So Krita is one of those programs that takes a little bit longer if you do file open, so I usually just drag my files into here. So I want to first grab my biomes file, and I want to drag that in. There's actually another file that I would tell you to grab. When you do enough of these, you'll eventually get recent documents. But one thing about the biomes file that you really have to know going into it is it's probably the most temperamental file for anything to do with maps. It's really there's really no gray area on it. The colors that are used, the 5 colors for the 5 basic biomes, there used to be more, there may be more again in the future, but for right now there's 5. Those can vary from version to version, and even within some changes within a version, like in experimental, like occasionally Fun Pimps will make some changes. So it's a good idea to start with a known working biome, one that you've tested with the version that you're working in. Right now is 19, so I've got one on my desktop that I keep here. It's called Color Palette. I've already opened it, so I'm going to open it from inside Krita, but you definitely, this is just the way I do it. You can do it however you like, but this is how I like to do that, is to have a palette that I know has no errors on it. Now there's a couple other things. Let's get our files loaded first. Oh, that's the wrong folder. Okay, so let's drag our biomes in. Okay, great. Now the next thing we want to do, depending on how much experience you have with Photoshop or with doing images, what we want to do here is we want to throw that map that we made to grayscale, and we want to throw it onto here, but we don't want it on here because it'll just destroy the map. So you want to make sure you're using a layer. I'm sure there's plenty of you guys that already know what I'm talking about here, but just want to point out for anybody that's probably or maybe never done this, you're going to drag this in. It's going to give you the option here. It just automatically comes up. You're going to put this in as a layer, and what we're going to do is we're going to delete that later on, and then we're just going to use the biome file. But this is just going to basically work as a stencil for us. So again, in the first step, we could have taken that water out and kind of made, would have been clear through to the color level. So The next important thing to note here is you have to always make sure you've got the biome file selected when you're actually trying to paint anything, because if you don't, the green will come out onto the stencil, and when you delete that, none of the saves will happen underneath. I do the same thing with the masking file. So we obviously can't see through there, so over here we have the opacity slider, and you can kind of make this as accurate, as opaque or as solid as you like. I think those are opposites. And this is basically it. So the next thing we want to do is we want to open our color palette as a separate. So we want to open it in a new document. And yep, that worked. Okay. So now we've got all these colors that we know are good. You don't want to use, you really want to go basic with the tools here. The biggest reason that I use Krita as opposed to just doing it in paint.net or doing it in another tool is it's basically zero tolerance. There's a tool right here you can see in my lower right hand corner. Screenshot that one, because that's the brush that works for this. You want the pixel art brush. You don't want to do any drag and selections. You don't want to do any cuts or pastes. You don't want to do any erasing. You want to just basically go over what you have. I do mine in forest because it just makes it easier to do it in forest for me to be able to see with the stencil. Okay, so with that in mind, let's look at our map and see where we want to start. Okay, so now we have everything loaded up. We want to start looking at what do we want to add here. So we're going to go kind of old school, I think, and we're going to put in the southeast corner up to these mountains here. We want to do something like maybe desert there, and then we've got these cities here. You can't see my mouse. The cities there on the western central side. They're split up by the highway, so I'm thinking I might leave one end forest and maybe put some wasteland in there. So, and then in the north, we don't have a lot of cities. It's just kind of a demo map. Maybe we'll put some winter. We'll put some snow biome, but then as we go east and we get towards the water, we can have some fun with the lakes there and maybe add in some green on the other side, or maybe a burnt little island there. Green little island might be cool. And then as we move south along the eastern edge, we've got some islands there. That's right where the desert will be ending, so we could do some cool little mixed forest desert islands. Those two work pretty awesome together when you mix them up. So I can show you a bit of that as well. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of techniques here, and then I'm going to probably pause because it takes quite a while to do these, but let's go through a couple of steps first. Also, I'll show you this. When you want to, basically these are the toggles for the layers, so when you want to go back and make sure, now you see that we have this wasteland here. Actually brings me to a good point. And there's kind of this gray area. When I first started using these borders with Ravenhurst, my friend Dan Capo, he reported basically that the biome, that the border biome was a little bit thicker than the actual radiation zone, which is another file. I can show you that file. That file is here, and one day I'll do a video. I don't entirely understand radiation. I don't always use it. I know Damocles at Nitrogen is not a huge fan, but most of the big modders like to have it in there. So basically, I don't really test this. I know that the radiation is in there. It's really just a demarcation for players to see. So we've got this kind of mixed in edge. It's fine the way it is. You can remove it. I try to just keep this intact as I go. You'll start to see what I'm saying. That would probably be the one tool besides the paintbrush I would tell you to use. But again, you'd have to make sure that you've got pixel art here selected, and you can go ahead and do click and drag. Okay, there's no color probably. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this back on, and okay, we're going to start with the winter biome, I think. So let's grab some snow. Again, always good to work with a file that you know works. It'll just save you headaches. And there is actually also a tool that you can use. Let's go ahead and bring, now, okay, now you can see my mouse. There's a tool you can use if you do end up having pixel errors on here. That comes with Nitrogen, and I will show you how to use that. If you do this the way that I show you with Krita, you shouldn't even need to use it. I never really usually ever need to correct my maps. So let's start with a smaller brush. And again, when you're doing this, you can really go as crazy. Actually, I want to start up here. But I mean, you can really just follow this edge around and follow the natural border. And oh, see, breaking my own rule there, drawing inside the stencil. You want to make sure, and you'll know after a while, as you've got the color here, you'll know the difference if you're writing on the, see how it looks different there? It's got that greenish, so you'll know you're in the wrong layer. So, you know, you can really, I usually do these rough, and I kind of use the roads as borders, so I'll do a rough here, but, you know, depending on how crazy that you want to get, you can really bring the brush down, and you can fool with this a bit. Like, you know, do you want your snow-capped end up here on the top of the hill, or do you want it to go right up to the bottom there? So I would say probably stick to the top. And again, you can really get as crazy with it as you want or not. You know, you roughly, when you do enough maps, you'll start to kind of know the heights that you're working from. So yeah, there's that. So I mean, a really good easy way to do it without having to get too crazy is to just stay along a road, the same way that you would with water. So you basically go along a road. I go with a smaller brush, and again, that's usually why I do, oh, went too far in. That's usually why I start with the wider brush and kind of leave this wide. Then you can come back and basically make this super neat. And you know, roads are really, if you don't have the natural borders, roads are really the best way to make a good unique demarcation area. And after, you know, again, if you test around enough, you'll see what works and what doesn't look good. You know, certain areas you can really make, if you plan, especially if you plan maps, you can really make some good stuff. So okay, I kind of want to go a lot into the snow. I think I'm going to go all the way across here, so we'll go basically directly across to here, and then we'll do some desert. Always remember, desert is the tanner of the biome colors. That orange is, a lot of people don't know these. I'll go through them for you if you like. So this would be forest, snow. Forest is green, snow white. Wasteland orange, desert tan, and purple is the burnt forest. So there's that. Let's grab some desert. Okay. And again, I'm just going to kind of roughly do this. And I see we've got some good borders here. So you could leave, just for testing, we'll bring the brush size down. We want to leave this peninsula here, maybe forest. So we'll go real easy around this little piece here. You know, this is the kind of thing that really makes a good map, is making sure that you don't want any little green pieces kind of hanging around or sticking around. RWG does that, and I just think it looks lousy. So it's one of the reasons I do this, is to keep these nice and clean. It really makes the features in the map kind of pop. But again, always make sure, and you can always go back and roughly fix them when you fly them, if that's how you do your maps. I usually fly mine if I take we'll just do it rough. Actually, we can go right up to the road. So we'll go right up to here. Yep, we've got we can follow this. Let's look out further. Yep, so basically we can follow this highway here, basically right down, and then just come out at the other end here, and it'll terminate in the waste. Okay. So yeah, we'll ride that all the way up, and this will be this whole biome all along this river. That'll look really good. So you'll be standing at the edge of the desert looking west. Yeah, okay. So now here, we want to do, let's go ahead and make this area in here. Let's make this the waste. This center city just south of the the highway, and then maybe one of those cities, and then we'll make the rest green. Maybe we can do that center town there. This one here, we can do that in burnt to kind of break it up. It'll also lead you out on the other end to the desert, which is always, burnt forest is pretty good for that. Yeah, and that should pretty much do that. So again, you can look at the changes that we've already kind of made. After you draw for a while with this stencil, you'll come in and it'll look a little bit silly at first, but again, as I start to trace these all out, think I'm still in desert here. Let me grab desert just to make sure. We'll bring our brush down. I'll show you a little more. That's still a little bit too big. You can kind of get away with it, but again, I always just really try to be careful of those. So, all right, so I'm going to pause here because this is going to take a long time, but I think I've given you kind of the basics. There was actually one other thing that another user brought up, which is the circle stamps. Let me see if I can find a good example of that. Actually, I think we were already looking at those. Like here, you'll get these circles. A lot of people don't like those. I try to use those. Yeah, there's not a whole lot in this map because this is a pretty smooth map, but I would usually use those as a demarcation point. I think that was Landberry that asked that question, or we were discussing it. But I can do another video also on height mapping. So let me pause here, guys, and I will come back when this is a little bit better painted up. Stay tuned. Okay, guys, we're back. Took a little time and painted this up. Figured I'd show you the results on this. Came out pretty good. Now, if you see here, I mean, this is pretty much what you end up with, but it makes it a whole heck of a lot easier to just use that. I added some features in here just to show you guys what they look like. This is, if you can see here, is basically a just islands. Added a little bit of desert. Did the same here. Those usually come out pretty good. You see, I followed generally along the roads. You won't see the center of the road, so as long as you keep it on the road, that's usually neat enough. Added some other good areas in here, broke it up. Another one of those islands here. So the next step, once we are good, because we haven't saved it all, would be to remove this. We could always add it later if we need to add it back, but we're going to remove that, and then we're going to save. Just follow defaults. Cool. And that should be it. We can go to the folder and see that it's there. Again, always make a backup just in case. In this case, I tested it, but we're gonna. Okay, so let's assume now that you're all set and you load this, and you get errors or the whole map is snow. That's one that happens a lot with a couple of different older versions of Nitrogen. You can go ahead and fix these. You can do the same with vanilla. So we're going to copy this and we're going to go into our Nitrogen install. So under the top folder of the Nitrogen install, you go to Tools, Biome Fixer, and then I see I've already got one in here. You're going to basically drop that in there, and then you want to use the default fixer. There's also a custom fixer. I haven't really played with that. And this is basically it. No wrong colors, so we were fine there. But this is how you would do it. If it found any errors, it'll replace them. Now, one other thing I'll say about this is if there's too many bad pixels, what Nitro does is it basically brings those pixels to the closest of those 5 colors. So, you can do them dirty and just fix them, but then a lot of times you'll end up with, little pepperings of like forest and burnt, or, it could be any combination depending on what you're working with at the time. So that's something to keep in mind. So try to be as clean as you can. I just run the fix anyways. This will output a biomes _fixed PNG. So we're going to grab that and we're going to head back to, our, actually we'll go here, we'll go to our map folder. Paste. You can rename that, do whatever you want. You can save that as a backup. I know that we're good here with the colors, so we're going to just rename this back to biomes.png. And pretty much that's it. We'll go ahead and run 7 Days to Die. Now, you could start a new game in this. I'm going to load this with the world editor, but it's basically the same thing. I don't have trees turned on my editor, so you'll notice that. But we'll go ahead and run this. And again, if you have any errors in your biomes file, it'll be at that point that you find it at this point here. You'll start to get spam errors, but if you run that fix every time it'll be fine for you. So waiting, waiting, waiting. Hey guys, we're back, and we've got our map here. It's looking pretty good. Damocles and nitrogen set the highways to this damaged condition, so they're chopped up like this, but I hear that there's going to be an option for full regular highways. So as you can see, like here I went a little light. It makes for a nice bank. I've got the trees turned off, so this might not be the best way to show you, but just gives you a quick view. Where else can we look? Let's look at our map again. Let's see. Let's go to the center. Yeah. Let's have a look and see what these burnt islands turned out like. Okay, we gotta go a little further west. Let's see, yeah, next to this city. Oh yeah, this came out good. See, it's hard to show with the biomes. I also have another mod that turns the biome effects off for mapping, but we'll just get out of wasteland. We've got this one little green piece. It's kind of surrounded. This looks pretty good to me, guys. So this is pretty much how you do it. Okay, well, I hope that this video was useful for you guys. If you have any questions, please either post them here, or you can find me at Discord. It's Crunchy Town Maps and Mods. Drop by, and I'll take all your questions then. Thanks for watching.